What you gonna do? I call it housework, cause it's light work. What you gonna do? I'ma throw shapes, feeling the bass till my feet hurt. I call it housework, cause it's light work. What you gonna do? But I'ma throw shade if I don't get paid for this housework. I call it housework, cause it's light work. What you gonna do? I'ma throw shapes, feeling the bass till my feet hurt. I call it housework, cause it's light work. What you gonna do?
Yeah, let's talk about some different kitchen options. So for flippers, investors, you know, what are some of the hot trends right now? I know it used to be cherry cabinets were all the rage. Now everybody's going to shaker white cabinets.
Buy a maple cabinet just to look at darker stain, which kind of looks good in here because it's good contrast with the granite, stainless steel appliances, and the darker flooring.
When I'm walking around with my buyers, when we're looking at different cabinetry, some of the things we like to look at is the quality of the cabinetry. So we're looking at how thick the door is. Are they real wood cabinets? Are they just stapled, or in this case screwed? Or are they dovetail?
Yeah, so this is obviously a condo. So this is a new condominium complex. They're developing here. There's supposed to be 250 units in this entire complex here in East Hampton. So they're gonna get these things up and going. They're selling for around $250,000 to $300,000. So obviously this builder is not gonna be spending a ton of money on massive upgrades in the kitchen, but he's gonna do a fairly good job and make it really presentable.
Sure. So, and if a seller or a homeowner is looking to maybe do some pre-listing readiness, getting their house ready for sale, and maybe they have some old Formica cabinets, let's talk about some different countertop options. It looks like we might have some quartz or granite. Which one is this?
This is a granite. This is a standard granite. It's just your basic granite countertop.
What they kind of call a level 1 granite,
yeah,
with a typical rounded edge.
Yep.
You know, obviously the more edging you put on your granite, the more expensive it's going to be.
Of course.
But if you're looking to put your house on the market for sale, obviously you're going to look for the cheapest way out, but still good quality. So. Yeah. Granite, quartz, kind of in the same pricing line.
It's always nice if you can do a granite countertop. People kind of like that. This is hard to burn. Like you can settle things down on this hot plates, hot pans, and it won't damage this.
Sure.
So this is really durable.
So as far as cost, you know, Formica, which is basically plastic over wood. Right. Then that kind of developed into our Corian. Yep. And now everybody seems to be using the granite and the quartz.
Yeah, and then in the higher end listings, what do we see usually? Sometimes we'll see a marble, sometimes we'll see...
Yep, which is not as typically as durable as granite.
It's not.
But there's a lot of other options, concrete.
And then in here, what he did was, he kept it open, an open floor plan. So a lot of buyers these days really like that open floor plan. They don't like to see it chopped up first level where you're kind of spending time in the kitchen and you're also spending time in the living room. I like
so
how
everybody loves the open concept, right?
Yeah, they love the open concept. So you've got the dining room on that end, and you've got the living room here and the kitchen right in the middle. So you're kind of all meshed in here.
Let's talk about some flooring options, because I see they use a pre-finished hardwood, right? So everybody still seems to like the hardwood all the way through the home. Obviously that's going to be the most expensive feature versus possibly carpeting in your bedroom, but different flooring options. There's so many today. This particular one, pre-finished in the factory. So it's gonna be sanded, primed, poly, and everything in the factory.
The biggest difference with these is that you've got this micro bevel right here between the seams. Yeah. So this here is kind of where you've got a little bit of a dip. Like you can't really see it, you can't really tell, it's just a micro bevel. So you get stuff kind of caught in here, but the good thing about this wood is that when you're installing it, it doesn't cause a mess, and you can also refinish this down the road. So if somebody wanted to refinish this, they certainly could do that.
Sure.
Once they hit this with a 36 grit sandpaper, it'll reduce that micro bevel.
Yeah, so the other options are, you know, purchasing the hardwood, they let it cure in the home, company comes in, sands, polyurethanes, sometimes stain.
Right.
And then a lot of flippers, investors, and builders are now using some what we call LVP, luxury vinyl plank options.
Yeah. We'll show you some of that too.
They're vinyl options, but they look like wood, they look like tile.
Yep.
There's all kinds of different flooring options.
This is a really good option if you're just trying to eliminate a mess when you're doing the install. Like dust can get everywhere. So this is a great option for flippers or anybody who's renovating a home and wants to eliminate dust.
Yep. So and then if you are a seller that's just looking to, you got some worn carpet, you know, obviously spending money on hardwood may not be the way to go. Maybe just putting some cheaper Berber.
Right. So the best option, obviously, is to use the raw wood, and like Eric said, let it cure, come in, sand it, stain it. That's the best option. That's what everybody loves. This would be a good alternative to that. So if you look under here, I can show you if this pulls up. That's not gonna pull up. Yeah, here we go. So you can see it's actual real wood.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
So
and
this
actually,
could be
some of your composite products have a 1/4 inch
Right.
of hardwood on top,
Yep.
and then the rest of it is composite. So you can actually get one sand and refinish out of those types of flooring systems.
Yeah.
So let's talk about windows for a minute, right? When we're representing buyers, one of the things we want to do is take a close look at the windows, because obviously replacing windows is a big cost. So if we have original windows, well, do the original windows have storms on the outside? Are they being protected? What's the condition of the putty on the outside of the windows? But if they have been replaced, we can't automatically assume that they're new replacement windows.
Correct.
What's some of the things that we look for in sort of older replacement windows that we can kind of figure out what's the life of that window?
Seal will sometimes go, and this will get kind of fogged up, and you can't really wipe it down clean because it's on the inside of the glass. So if the seal breaks, it doesn't mean that the window's damaged and won't work properly, but it's an aesthetic issue, and you'll kind of have that staining
Sure.
on the window.
Yeah, and like Dan said, once that seal goes, there's an argon gas that leaks out of there. It allows moisture to get in there, so sometimes it'll look cloudy. There'll be some moisture inside the window.
Those are things we look at when we're showing houses, and that'll give us kind of a sense of what the age of that window replacement is and when it was done.
And homeowner inspectors kind of go back and forth on how much does that actually impact the R value or the insulation value of the window. Some will say, yeah, it definitely impacts the insulation value, and some say it does not. But it's certainly unsightly, it's certainly a cosmetic issue, and it might be something that a seller wants to address prior to listing their home.
Another nice feature this builder did here was use crown molding. So a lot of builders don't use crown molding. This one did, which is a really nice touch. It kind of gives the room a nice warm feeling, and it kind of completes everything.
The trim, whether it's around the windows, whether it's around the room in crown molding, or whether it's shadow boxing or chair rail on the wall, trim makes the room. From an investment or a flipper standpoint, there's all different kinds of windows, so you gotta know what you're looking at. There could be a Home Depot, Lowe's type of quality, builder's quality window, and then it kind of goes up the chain there, the difference between maybe what type of window, Dan?
Harvey window,
Anderson
windows,
Marvin Integrity.
and they make all kinds of different grades of windows. So you can go from a window replacement for a whole house from around $20,000 all the way up to $50,000
Sure.
windows.
And what does that mean in a time frame that a window will last? You know, a builder's quality, maybe a Home Depot window could last you 10, 15 years versus a Marvin Integrity Anderson window that might last up to 30 years.
Right, and then if you go for that upgraded window, it doesn't mean that the window product itself is more efficient. It just means that it gives it that aesthetic look. So a lot of times Anderson or Marvin or Harvey will make a wood kind of finish, and the window itself is just more aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, and the nice thing about an Anderson window or a better quality window is that when parts start to go on it, they're easily replaceable.
So a lot of times when you're in the master bedroom, it's always nice to have access to a full bath. If there's not a full bath or an ensuite tied to that master bathroom, it's nice to have access to one. So in this case, what they did here was they put a pocket door in the full bath upstairs, where the first and second floor bedrooms are sharing this room. So the master bedroom or the primary bedroom is sharing this bathroom with a pocket door. So they have access to it right through here, which is really nice. Nice to see that. And it's sleek, it's easy, it's not gonna be in the way when you're opening and closing it. You can easily shut it or keep it open, whatever somebody wants to do.
So we were talking about countertops earlier. We forgot to mention one sort of countertop which builders and investors like to call cultured pearl. What we actually have is molded plastic. So it's certainly a cheaper cost for this product, kind of along the same lines as a Formica countertop. Something a buyer should be aware of, and sellers for that matter, is smoke detectors. When we're doing our final walkthrough, we're making sure that there's smoke detectors in the home, because the sellers will have the option of signing or not signing an affidavit at closing that says they installed smoke detection in the immediate vicinity of all the bedrooms, per manufacturer's instructions. and that there's at least one carbon monoxide detector in the home.
Correct. Now, if they sign that affidavit and they're kind of off the hook, they can just say we're not providing. We don't know if they're there. They don't want any responsibility for it. They can just sign that affidavit and they're no longer responsible, and they no longer have to give any kind of credit to the buyer to go ahead and purchase that equipment.
Yeah. So that law changed October of 2023 because prior to that, if the seller did not fill out that affidavit, they would give a buyer a $250 credit at closing.
Or they would provide the buyer with the carbon monoxide and the smoke detectors, the appropriate amount that they would need for the house.
That's right.
So in a condo, anything built after 1990, carbon monoxide detectors need to be interconnected with each other. Anything before 1990, obviously it's no longer a requirement.
Most sellers think they have to provide property disclosures. It's certainly a good idea, but they're not mandated to do it.
And the property disclosures are basically just a series of questions about the house itself, the complex, where it lives, where it sits, things like how old the roof are, if there's any leakage in the basement, if they have any idea if there's insulation, how old the mechanicals are. And if they choose not to fill those disclosures out, they can provide the buyer with a $500 credit.
$500 credit at closing. But if it's an estate or if it's in a trust, the owners, the executors are not mandated to provide.
Correct. They've obviously never lived in the house. They're just taking over responsibility to sell the property, so they have no responsibility to fill out property disclosures or provide them to the buyer.
All right, let's talk about attic access for a minute. So there's all kinds of attic access, everything from a hatchway to pull down stairs to my favorite, a walk-up attic. But in this case, we have pull down stairs, right? Very convenient, certainly for storage. And when you're touring a home and you're serious about it and you're gonna make an offer on it, you certainly wanna poke your head up there and take a look around.
Here we go. Yeah, so we're obviously looking for insulation. We want to make sure everything is nicely insulated. We also want to look for ventilation. We want to make sure the attic is being properly ventilated. This is a space where mold can easily grow and form, so ventilation is super, super important. So if you have access to an attic, definitely at least poke your head up there, take a look around and make sure it looks and smells like an attic.
So let's break those down individually. Let's talk about insulation for a minute. What are we looking for? Right now we're looking at batt insulation. And you want to see it just like it is here, high up to the top of these roof rafters, you know, because over time this will deteriorate and shrink on you. And then usually what happens is an insulation company will come up here and they'll do a spray insulation over the top.
That's a blown-in insulation.
Blown-in insulation.
Yeah, so this is your standard fiberglass insulation. It's got pink looking stuff and you got the paper on one side and the insulation on the other. You want to install it with the paper down, not on top. You want to install it kind of this way. So whenever you see insulation installed with the paper up, it wasn't installed properly. We see it a lot. You want to make sure that you're putting paper down.
Sometimes we're going to see insulation actually up in the roof rafters here, and we see that a lot on older homes, or maybe somebody did it themselves and they just thought they would be better insulated by adding more insulation, which is not always the case. But if we do have insulation between the roof rafters, we certainly want to see some styrofoam baffles behind it, allowing proper airflow. So if we have a ridge vent, which most roofers will automatically cut into the ridge when they're replacing the roof, we want to see soffit venting as well, because we want the air to come in through the soffits, up through the roof rafters, and going out through your ridge vent.
Yeah, ventilation is super, super important when you're in an attic space, for sure.
A home inspector is going to be searching for mold in the home, and there's basically two areas where, you know, we can find mold, usually in basements or attics. And when you have mold in an attic, typically that's that white penicillin type of mold. You have to understand how mold works. The spores rise up and out of the home. So if I had my choice, I wouldn't want either, but if I was gonna have mold anywhere between a basement or an attic, I'd want it in an attic because it's gonna rise up out of the home.
Yeah, mold tends to accumulate or appear in areas where it's really dark and a little bit damp. That's what mold thrives off of, that's what it lives off of. Keeping the airflow and ventilation in an attic space is super important for that reason.
Yeah, and most of the time when you have mold in an attic, it has to do with improper airflow and ventilation. Whereas in a basement, typically you got mold in a basement, it's from water penetration.
A lot of times I'll have basements that have dehumidifiers, so it kind of takes that moisture out of the air and puts it into the dehumidifier and you plumb it down into the sink or out into a drain.
How do we get water penetration in attic space? Well, unless a huge branch is just falling through your roof or we got a huge hole in the roof, typically that's not the way. Typically it is flashing around a chimney or where two roof lines meet.
Yeah.
It usually has to do with improper flashing.
So when you're looking in the attic and you're looking at the roof sheathing here, what you want to take a look at are the nail holes here. So we really don't want to see any kind of water staining, any black buildup here or rusting. that's a sign that there's issues with the roof, issues with maybe the shingles, maybe they're getting older and they need to be replaced or remediated.
It's also a good indication of improper ventilation because it's creating a lot of moisture in the attic space.
Right. So what we see here, no staining, no black staining. You see the nails, they're clear, and there's really no issues here with this roof. This is a newer roof, so there really shouldn't be any problems.
We're definitely not plumbers, but let's talk plumbing for a minute. Basic plumbing, we have PVC piping here, and anytime you see this black, it's called ABS. Every home inspector is going to tell you, do not combine ABS to PVC because the glue does not adhere well. Pull down stairs or any attic space is obviously great for storage. And the nice thing about this particular home, this is stick built versus trusses. So if you have trusses that are made in a factory, they would extend all the way across your attic space. It's really hard and really not feasible for attic storage. But when you have a stick built home, you can put some plywood down, lots of additional space for storage.
So we're in the mechanical room here. This is what we have. This is our classic furnace. So we have two different types of heating systems. You have a furnace and you have a boiler. This is a furnace. This means that this is fueled by gas. This is your natural gas line, comes in here, heats up the air, and pushes the air through the house.
Right, it's being vented directly to the outside. So what's the difference between a furnace and a boiler? In this case, we have a furnace, it's tied to ductwork, and when we have a boiler, it's tied to baseboard heating.
What the boiler does is it heats up the water, pushes it through the house. That's where you see those radiator baseboard heating systems throughout the house on basically the ground floor. In this case, this is the hot air system, so it just has the vents, and also tied into the hot air system or it could be the air conditioning. So you get hot air and you get cold air through those vents.
So some hot water options with an older style boiler, you might have a immersion coil, so the boiler is actually heating up the water and a coil on the boiler. Then you might have a separate hot water tank in some cases, whether it's 40 or 50 gallons. And now we have nice high efficiency wall mounted on demand, in this case gas, hot water tank.
Right, so the water runs through here, it automatically heats this up and sends the hot water through the house. So really efficient. If you don't have one of these, what we typically see are the standalone hot water heaters. You could always put one in here if you wanted to, just keep hot water on reserve. But with a smaller house or a smaller condo, this is more than adequate.
So what we want to be aware of when we're looking at a home, specifically in the basement, is what type of electrical system it may have. An older home that has fuses, where we actually, they're glass fuses, they spin out. It'll be very hard to get insurance for a house that has fuses these days. So most insurance companies will require you to update to either a 100 amp or in this case, a 200 amp electrical service.
And it's nice to see that we have extra room here for expansion if they needed it. So whenever you see that these circuit breakers are totally maxed out, that just means that if you ever did something like central air conditioning or added a pool or a jacuzzi, you would probably need an extra sub panel in addition to what's already there.
Let's talk garage doors. So basically two options. You could have an insulated or an uninsulated door. And we're in a condo today where there's actually living space above the garage, so they opted for an insulated door.
Right, so what we want to see with these garage doors is obviously you want to see these safety sensors down below here. These safety sensors are great for, they're needed for in case you have kids, pets, anything that might travel through here while the garage door is coming down, you don't want to closing on them. So making sure these sensors are here, making sure they work properly is super important.
So what I also like about this door is they put an extra support beam across the door for added support, so this door over time doesn't fold in half on you. What I would also like to see is an extra support beam going down this way, teed off, because this is tied in directly to the door, and over time that can actually pull out of the door. So one other feature that you'd like to see in a garage door, let's give a list. Is it quiet? Is it noisy? In this case, super quiet. All right, one other safety feature that actually is mandated is that it has to pop up with some resistance in case a child or a dog or somebody else.
Let's give it a shot.
Let's try it out on Dan. Go. Oh, you're in the eyelets, Dan.
Here we go.
Ready?
Yep. So this should go back up a little pressure.
So every garage door opener should have its own dedicated outlet. Certainly for safety, some older homes, we might see some cords hanging down, plugged into the wall. But in this case, this meets code, it has its own outlet.
Yeah, and to do that, it's not very expensive. And if you have one of those extension cords, which we see a lot in older towns and older homes, they kind of just hang and they're dangerous. So to install one of those, it's only about $500, $600 to do, to hire an electrician to get that done. So definitely a good thing to do if you don't have that currently.
Let's cover decking first off. Cheapest form of decking is going to be a pressure treated lumber. Then they came out with a first series Trex, which they said it's an all composite material. It wasn't supposed to stain, it wasn't supposed to warp, wasn't supposed to deteriorate, but it actually does all those things. So they came out with a second series Trex, which is what we're standing on right now, which is a composite material covered by a plastic material. The most expensive, most attractive, what a lot of people are liking to use right now is called AZAC, and it's actually a 100% plastic deck material, but also the most costly.
And when you see these being installed, you don't want to see these abutting each other, because when they're installed too tightly during colder and warmer seasons, they tend to expand and contrast and they'll start to buckle. So you want to keep a little bit of space in between each of these boards. Also on this deck here, we see here that they've got the metal railings with a plastic top. This is really nice. It's aesthetically pleasing. It's durable. Sometimes we'll also see just wood balusters, which are also nice, but this is the way to go if you can afford to do this.
There's also plastic railings. There's all kinds of materials. You just want to know what you're purchasing. So let's talk siding for a minute. So older style homes typically had either an asbestos siding, wood clapboard siding, or in some cases, wood cedar shake shingle. And all of our designs that we have today typically stem off those kinds of wood sidings. After wood clapboard siding came out, they made aluminum siding, and then aluminum siding progressed to what we have here, Dan.
This is a vinyl siding. So this is your standard vinyl siding. This comes in different colors, different designs. A lot of times you'll see that design that looks like a shaker kind of look. That's a really expensive kind of siding. So we see that on some homes, maybe just on the front of the house or as accents. Some people do wrap the whole house in it. It is expensive, but it's a beautiful, beautiful look. This is your standard vinyl siding, which we see on a lot of homes today. To touch back on wood, we do still see a lot of homes that are covered in wood siding. Typically you want to paint wood siding every 7 to 10 years. Just something to think about when you're buying a house with wood siding versus vinyl, which is very, very durable and efficient.
Some higher end homes do have what's called a cement board that looks exactly like a wood clapboard or a vinyl siding, but it's made of cement, composite material, and is probably double the cost.
Right.
If you do have an older home, a lot of times multifamilies will have asbestos siding. If you're purchasing a house with asbestos siding, very common in West Hartford,
right,
you just want to know that you have it first off, and you want to know that when it's time to upgrade the siding, there's going to be an additional cost for proper disposal.
Also, with that asbestos siding, if you're buying a house with asbestos siding, you want to make sure it's not damaged in any way. It should be painted, it should be secured, it should be in pretty good condition, and if it does start to get damaged, you'll start to see that black asbestos layer underneath that wood siding.
The good news is they are coming out with some new composite materials that will look like the asbestos siding, so if you just have to do some spot repairs, you could save some money that way. There's a lot of venting that comes out of homes. In this case, so it's probably for the dryer. We also see some other things coming out of the home, which is the venting for the furnace, as well as the hot water tank. So those are some of the things you want to take notice of, what the condition is.
And you want to make sure that there's nothing blocking them or obstructing them in any way. Sometimes you'll see them lower to the ground, but you want to make sure there's nothing up against it. In this case, they're nice and high, so nothing's ever going to get.
But if we ever do get a tremendous winter storm, it may get blocked. So what we're looking at right here is called a condenser. This is part of your air conditioning system, and it's tied in with your air handler inside, which is obviously tied into all your ductwork. So you just want to know what the condition of this. The home inspector should be able to tell you how many years of shelf life this may have.
Things we look at when we're showing houses is we want to make sure that A, it looks a bit newer. We want to make sure that it's level and not leaning in any way, shape, or form. It's got a good platform and it's got some good insulation around the lines going into the house.
All right, so your deck is either going to be supported by 4x4s or in this case 6x6s. My preference, a lot more structurally sound, and these are going to be sitting on your footings, should be down to virgin soil under the frost line, so your deck will not heave on you.